Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Sustainability and Climate Podcast. As always, we're your hosts, Labake and Toby. We're super excited to have you on the podcast today. How are you, Toby?
Hi, Labake. Good to see your face again. Oh, you've changed location.
I have.
Can you please tell our listeners where you are at the moment?
So I am back in Lagos, where I live. Yes, and I had a very warm welcome, which is what Toby's alluding to. I had a very, very warm welcome in the city with severe traffic, as the newspapers have been saying it. I've been calling it, rather. So it's been a very interesting kind of land. But yeah, back in Lagos. I'm well. I'm good. I'm excited for this episode. How are you, Toby? How is spring in London?
Spring is springing. London is springing. But I'm good.
There's no way Toby is your favorite, guys.
Well, I'm well. I'm good. Enjoying London. Even though it's been kind of like a very funny, we say we have the bipolar weather in this country. Sometimes it's cold and sometimes it's hot. But yeah, it's been good. I'm enjoying the season. Everywhere fresh, everywhere nice. Like how we
he always says.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been good. Busy with work, and yeah, I can complain.
Awesome. Well, we're all well. How's everybody listening from the various countries? Would love to hear from you guys. So please feel free to drop us a comment, a message. You have our LinkedIn or our social media channels. But today's episode is really exciting. We have a really, really cool guest who we'll tell you about in a minute. But before, Toby has a lot happening that he wants to share with us. So what's in the news for you, Toby?
You see, just to correct an impression, all our guests have been cool, because Labake keeps saying we have a very cool guest. Yeah. But yeah, all our guests have been cool. But yeah, in terms of the news, a lot have been going on. I want to start with a positive, or will I call it positive, or good news. So there's this group of guys or people who call themselves the Just Stop Oil. For many of you that don't know, these are a group who have been going around and doing some disruptive protests, throwing soup at paintings, and they've decided that they want to put an end to that, which is good news. So it's a UK climate group. They announced that at the end of this month they'll be putting an end to their disruptive protests. And after they've been doing this for 3 years. Busting the scene in the blaze of orange. At the end of April, they've come to realize that, they think they've been able to pass on their message. But before they drop all their equipment or whatever they use, they said there's one final action in London, which will happen at the Parliament Square later this month. And so I hope that they've been able to pass their message, and this basically has the leaders or our leaders have been able to receive whatever message that these guys have been trying to pass. Because what they've been doing in terms of their protest was to bring an end towards new oil and gas, which they believe that different government and its policies have not been working well. Because in early March, the UK government confirmed that it has committed to issue no new licenses to explore new oil and gas fields. And so they believe that, one of our objectives have been met, and so they are putting an end to that. And so they said they'll be using a new approach to fight against it, which they called a morally bankrupt political class as the global temperature rise. So yeah, thankfully,
morally bankrupt political class. Strong words.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, they also said that they've been able to keep more than 4.4 million barrels of oil in the ground, and they've become one of the most successful civil resistance campaign in recent history. Kudos to them.
The air quotes.
I needed to do that, but yeah.
Okay.
How about you? Do you have any news for us, Labake?
No, you had a whole roster, so I want you to go through your roster. Go ahead.
Oh,
What's the next one?
okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Labake is giving me the privilege to be your
I'm giving
news
you the floor
anchor so
for
I
the
think
day.
yes,
Yes.
for this episode. So my second news is around the United States. US banks have Labake know why I'm laughing. US banks have predicted climate goals will fail, but air conditioning firms will thrive. And this report is predicting that the global heating will bring catastrophe and that air conditioning market will grow by 4%. And according to the report, which was put together by Morgan Stanley, JPMorgan Chase, and the Institute of International Finance, they all make it clear that the finance sector, they consider the Paris agreements it's basically limiting global temperature, which was signed a decade ago. And if investors and key players don't actually act on it, it's going to be a dead path. And so they are calling on everyone to play a part in order not to allow the world lead to what they call a catastrophic heat wave, flood, and economic strife. And this research also forecasts that there will be a multiplied heat wave, and they want everyone to take action. And so, yeah, fingers crossed. And we believe that the US signing out of the Paris Agreement will definitely inspire a lot of corporate philanthropies to continue to play their parts in protecting and securing our planets. So, yeah.
Well said. Very well said.
And talking about JPMorgan, and we are excited and happy to announce to you that our guest today is from JPMorgan Chase. And so you guys should sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Sustainability and Climate Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to our episode of the Sustainability and Climate Podcast. As we said, we have an incredible guest for you today. We have Brian DiMarino. And Toby is going to tell us a little bit about him, and then we'll kind of jump into the great questions.
All right, thank you so much, Labake. Guys, yes, as we mentioned, we have a very interesting, and so one thing about our podcast, well, we have cool guests, and so today's guest is no exception. And so it's a great honor for us to have Brian DiMarino, who is the Managing Director and Deputy Director of Global Sustainability at JPMorgan Chase. Guys, while I was preparing for this, I got to realize that Brian started his career at JPMorgan in 2006. And I was being pushed to ask Labake, what was Labake doing in 2006? But I'll leave that for later. But yes, Brian, we're excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We know that this will be an insightful conversation for our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I think I've already been complimented. I've never been called cool. I think as a financial sector employee. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So jumping into that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your kind of career, and how you ended up in the role that you are? What inspired your interest in sustainability as well, please?
Yeah, happy to do that. So you've mentioned, I've been at JPMorgan since 2006. So I'm pushing the 2-decade mark here at the firm. I have done a lot of different things at JPMorgan, but to keep it at a high level, I spent the majority of my career in finance roles. So everything from planning and analysis and budgeting to data analytics to running expense processes to being a CFO of multiple functions. And in doing that work, particularly when I was the CFO of some functions like real estate and some of our corporate functions like amenity services and global security and sourcing and things like that, I started to see how the firm operated. And I started to see some of the work that was sort of naturally already going on in the businesses around climate and sustainability, whether it was responsible sourcing of food or how we worked with our vendors and asking them to be sort of better players in different spaces, or what real estate was doing to reduce, energy use and things like that. And I sort of saw this opportunity to bring it together, and that's really what created what became my first sort of my first opening salvo in sustainability, which was the head of operational sustainability. And what that really meant was thinking of JPMorgan not just as a bank, but thinking of it as almost almost think of it not as a bank. Like we're a corporation. We operate every day around the world. And what does that mean? And how does that work? And how can we be a little bit better? And so that's kind of what got me into it. I grew up in an area of New York State, a couple hours north of New York City, and I sort of, you asked the question, like kind of my interest in sustainability and climate. To be honest with you, I grew up outdoors. Like I was an outdoors kid, like I spent a lot of time riding bikes in the woods and, playing in the dirt and digging holes. And I grew up in a beautiful area in New York called the Hudson Valley, right along the Hudson River. And I was just sort of surrounded by like a lot of natural beauty. And so, like our field trips in high school, like our fourth grade teacher would take us hiking. And I kind of grew up around it, and I sort of always enjoyed it and liked it and cared about it. Admittedly, at a bank, I didn't think I'd ever do anything in this space or directly in this space. And so I've been really excited to find an opportunity to spend a significant portion of my career now, a quarter of my career, focused on sustainability. So it's been pretty awesome.
It's good to hear that you were one of those kids who ride bike on the street. Right? But for me, it's the opposite, right? My parents will lock us inside the house. I'll be looking at other kids from the house. I'm trying to like, we wish we could ride the bikes like the other kids. But it's good to see that. Yeah. So if you look at businesses worldwide, right, one thing that is becoming a key priority for them is sustainability. How does JPMorgan integrate sustainability into what I'll call its overall corporate strategy, both in terms of its operations and its influence when it comes to the financial sector?
I think I like the word integrate a lot here, because that's really what it is about, right? I had talked about standing up a function that effectively was collating and collecting a lot of good work already going on and already happening inside of different functions at JPMorgan. That's the same on the banking side, by the way, right? We've got teams in the investment bank and in our sort of mid-market banking. We've got teams in asset and wealth management that are focused on this stuff in their own ways, right? So like in asset management, we have a team that manages real estate assets. There's someone who's the head of real estate sustainability for that division. So there are people in these businesses already focused on it. A lot of what this is about is how do you bring it all together and create a strategy? How do you make sure that you're creating synergy across pretty really good ideas to move things forward? And so it is truly about integrating it in JPMorgan, right? How do you make it a part of what we do, a part of our DNA? And it's actually not that hard to do when you recognize that the vast majority of what we're talking about is economic opportunity, growth, investment landscape. Like this is all, if you're willing to think, and we do, right? If you think of investing beyond the next 6 months or 6 years, and you really are a long-term investor, it matters. There are going to be companies that grow and scale significantly in the next decade around climate tech and innovation and energy efficiency and HVAC and renewables and everything else, and so I think that it's, like I said, it's the word integration is like a perfect way to describe it. It happens naturally here, and people see opportunity in business and they run to it. And this is one of those spaces.
Very awesome. I was going to ask before you answer that question, how sustainability, both as a strategy and a concept within JPMorgan, has changed over the past 20 years in the firm. I think that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's changed probably similarly the way that it's changed outside the firm, right? I think when I was a kid growing up, like we talked about, there was a hole in the ozone. Then we talked about global warming.
Yeah.
Then we talked about climate change and sustainability. Like the words sort of change over time. But I think what's more important is people's understanding of what's happening has changed over time. Like the words matter, right? Words always matter. They've always mattered. But in this particular case, it's also the understanding. And I think more and more people understand this space today than did 20 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. And that's why, I think there was a need. So we have a team at JPMorgan that's in the center in corporate responsibility. I'm a part of that team. I'm the deputy director of that team. So there's a head of that team as well who I report that does sustainability for the firm broadly, all the way from supporting the businesses to supporting, like our corporate responsibility work, to supporting operations and all that stuff. Like there's a need to have those things built in the center. That team's existed for as long as I've been at the firm, in some very small way, and then grown and grown and grown. And what has now happened is the teams inside the lines of businesses have grown and grown and grown. So the work of that team in the middle is different. They don't have to be the educator anymore to the businesses. The businesses have the institutional knowledge now. They understand the science, they understand the issues, they know how to talk to their clients. They don't need to bring in that team anymore. So I think what's changed is really that more people understand this stuff and can speak to it, have those first, second, third order conversations with clients and prospects, and bring this to the market. Like, I think that's what's really important is these are not, when a client asks about it now, bankers have answers. And I think that's a big difference in 20 years ago. Would have said, hey, we've got a team over here who can talk to you, and I think it's a big difference, and it feels a lot more robust when it's coming directly from your relationship manager.
That's a very good one and a very big one we haven't heard. The understanding has changed a lot over the years, which I can definitely agree
more
to.
Of it. We need more of it. But
yes,
we have got more today than we had yesterday. We just need to get to tomorrow.
I agree. You can always keep kind of getting that. So jumping into my actual question, in part of your role, you're responsible for kind of helping the firm meet its carbon neutrality goal. What have you found to be the most significant milestones in JPMorgan's path to carbon neutrality, and what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in that space as well?
I tend to lean on sayings that get stuck in my head, and one of them, as you've heard multiple times, is you can't manage what you can't measure. And so I think the biggest milestone for us was when we finally got a very good understanding of our operational emissions, when we really understood. And so we did that work. We had produced we had done our reporting under the greenhouse gas protocol for I would say probably 10 years. And then and a lot of it's based on, if you understand how the greenhouse gas protocol works, a lot of it's based on offtake. So you sort of, here's how many gallons of, I don't know, jet fuel you use, or how many tons of natural gas, whatever. And there's a multiplier that you use to calculate, but when you really get into the details is when you start to get to the actionable points, right? Like, if you understand how you're using those resources, where you're using them, and what conditions, what are the ambient temperatures and around your buildings when you're using certain, that's when you can actually start to dial in and figure out how to get better. And so I think one of the biggest milestones is when we really sort of dialed in our emissions. And we work on that every year. Every year we pick little pockets of data and we try to get better, try to get more data fidelity, try to go a little bit deeper, try to break it apart a little bit more. We have building by building emissions information now, which is super helpful for us. So that was a huge milestone. Obviously, a big milestone for us, which was very public, was when we moved into the engineered carbon removal space, right? So if you think of carbon neutrality and managing unabated emissions, we're working to reduce our emissions. We're spending, capital to reduce emissions of JPMorgan Chase. But as you're on that journey, you continue to emit. So how do you manage unabated emissions? We do that with carbon credits. We've historically done that with carbon credits. We've been buying carbon for probably since 2003 or 2004 or so. But in 2023, we agreed to start buying carbon credits in the engineered space. So that meant not just buying nature-based, we still buy nature-based credits, but also buying engineered removal. So now we're buying afforestation, reforestation, improved forest management, mangroves, grasslands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on the nature-based side. We bought in the hybrid space, so biochar and stuff that falls into the sort of hybrid category, and now buying in the engineered space, direct air capture, ocean capture, bikers, BECS, all that stuff. And so that to us was a big step forward, because those things are also incredibly investable industries. And so you start to see, moving from the, I'll call it, doing good into the doing well, right? There's this idea of balancing companies sort of doing well, as in, in their P&Ls and their 10Ks and stuff, and returning money to shareholders, which is what companies' sort of responsibility is to shareholders, and then doing good, right? So how do you also, around that, support communities, support the environment, et cetera, et cetera. So bringing those two things together is really, really awesome, important, and great for this is what companies should be doing. And I think we're really good at that. So, I think those are probably some of the biggest ones. Challenges, I mean, look, decarbonizing a very diverse portfolio of real estate is really hard, right? So JPMorgan's real estate, the majority of our operational emissions come from real estate. We operate commercial buildings in 60 countries around the world, probably 400, 200 some odd cities, I think is the number. We operate 5,000 or so Chase branches. It's a round number, but it's close to that. Chase branches in the United States of America, that's in all of the lower 48 states. So you've got to be able to decarbonize every one of those assets, and every one of them has a different emissions profile. They're constructed differently, they have different building systems. It's not like, you can't just go and buy 100 or 1,000 chillers of a specific size and brand and just go install them everywhere and get more efficient. It doesn't work that way. Solar panels are like, solar is great as a energy sort of mitigation strategy, but guess what? On small roofs, like the branch is like the size of your house, maybe it's even smaller, but they're not that big. You put solar panels on a roof that size, you don't really get paid back for doing that. There's not an economic benefit for that necessarily. On large corporate sites, sure. High rises, no, right? So like all of these different situations are very different. Let's bring in another fun factor, which is we don't own all of our real estate. Some of it we lease. Now you're talking to landlords and you're trying to incent them to do this for their building, but landlords operate on margins, right? They also have to return money to their investors. And so doing that next project may not be the right thing for the value of that asset. And so all these things create complications. So for us, it's been helpful because we are a large company with a big name and a lot of influence. Those landlords or vendors or to work with different municipalities and try to support this work so we can get it done. But it's not an easy go. I think this idea that, slap solar panels on every roof and, replace this with that and electrify your, heating systems, and it's not that easy. And so I think, it's important to keep trudging through this, but it is trudging through a swamp, and sort of every step feels like it's like trying to run in water. Like every step feels like it's just a little bit harder.
Yeah.
You get a little bit more tired, but you keep doing it, and eventually we'll get to the other side. But it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, and you touched on something briefly, which is on decarbonization, which we see that it's a major challenge, particularly for the large institutions with extensive real estate footprint. How is JP Morgan approaching this, and what are some of the biggest opportunities for reducing emissions within the firm's operations?
I mean, so first of all, it's like the first thing we do, right? Like the first thing you do is try to reduce emissions, of course, right? Like we operate on a mitigation hierarchy: stop emitting first, reduce emissions where you can't stop, and then we use other solutions like carbon credits and renewable energy where we aren't able to reduce to zero. So like we're on that journey, and we look across every single site and situation to try to find the best opportunities to do it. I mean, there are some ones that have been very successful for us, like LED retrofits, which we did back in 2016, 17, before it was, now kind of every light bulb is LED, but across JPMorgan's portfolio, we did an entire retrofit of every owned site and even some of the lease sites, replaced every light bulb with LEDs. That was from an economic situation, that paid us back in the first year and a half. That was like easy to get approved, smart money, good to spend. And by the way, it's not that's just the cumulative payback. The next day, now you're getting your net sort of making money, if you will, because our utility bills are lower, right? So one of the things that I think people have to realize is the sort of low-hanging fruit of decarbonizing comes with an economic payback that makes these things totally worthwhile, even if they weren't good for the environment. And that's okay if that's the business case and that's the rationale with which you go and get these things approved. That's fine. It doesn't matter why you do it. At the end of the day, using less electricity saves a company money. It saves us money. Like, of course it does, right? If you flip the light off in your house right now, you'll save money. And so that just, you can sort of get to that logical space and not look at everything like, just because it has some banner or some, some flavor of sustainability or climate or whatever, or renewable energy, that it's, it's going to be some charity case. That's not the case. Now, there are things as you move along the spectrum that get more and more expensive. They pay back over longer periods of time. Maybe they don't pay you back necessarily over the asset life, over depreciable life of an asset. that's okay too. We do those things in more of a pilot basis, right? So like we have the ability because of that large, diverse, distributed portfolio, we can try stuff, and we do. So we will work with, with different companies to like, deploy something in a branch that we're building from scratch or that we're retrofitting to try technologies and see how they work and to prove in the field what we think works on paper. So that's been useful technique for us too.
So,
But yeah, decarbonization it's tough. It's especially in the
yeah.
built environment assets last for. I mean, most of them are on paper built for 30 to 50 years, but most built environment assets live for 75 to 100 years. So, building the business case to tear down walls or rip out systems to replace them isn't always useful. By the way, let's remember, if you're going to do that, and the result of that is you're going to throw away some chiller or some HVAC unit that has refrigerant in it and is made from metal and all those other things, now you're creating a waste problem.
Yeah.
You're sort of cutting over your nose to spite your face. So all of that stuff has to be in balance. I don't say this stuff to make it sound like people shouldn't do it. Should do it. Just understanding that these things are hard, and if you hit a barrier or a hurdle, you can get over it. You just need to know that those things are naturally occurring in these conversations.
Also.
Yeah, I think also highlighting these challenges kind of gives opportunity for innovation, without kind of doing what you're doing and getting to, a point that presents that challenge. You don't know to solve that problem. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, my question now is, as JPMorgan is obviously a leader in global finance, but also in sustainability integration within financial firms. You have a significant role to play in, shaping sustainable investment trends. So how would you say the firm thinks about sustainability when it's making its investment decisions? And what role have you found sustainable finance to play in kind of supporting decarbonization efforts through investment?
Yeah, the financing stuff is also one of these very complicated things. There's many times where I'll be speaking at a conference or in a small room or whatever, and someone will ask a question and say like, why doesn't JP Morgan do more, like invest in more, or those types of questions. The way that like capital flows and the way that capital stacks are built and the way that companies go from sort of a pre revenue or pre money to like a scaled publicly traded company, there's a lot that happens in between those two things. And typically, and we've seen this in the climate tech space and the innovation economy, money comes early stage from, angel investors, venture capitalists. You start to get into some private equity. You'll start to get some debt that comes in. You start to build momentum. Banks of our size and scale historically don't get involved until, that kind of growth phase of a company when they're sort of established themselves, they've got sales, they're making money, we have something to bank on. And so that's a really important point in this space. Is we talk a lot about this idea of this, some people call it a missing middle, but it's this idea that where's the finance come after venture capital has come in, what happens next. And one of the challenges is that we've seen venture capital sort of that sort of machine worked really, really well during the tech revolution, right? Those were asset light, labor light sort of innovations and companies that, for the most part were, code in the background and you could sort of make money without spending a ton of money. I don't want to make it sound like it was free, but it was a different profile. Look at what climate tech, steel in the ground, significant labor, retraining workforces, permitting and siting, this is complicated asset heavy work. And so there's this gap that sort of formed because a lot of that next sort of tranche of capital is not comfortable putting in the dollar amount required to get the company to that next level without seeing the revenue sort of confirmed or firmed up through contracts, right? If some company shows up and goes, I've got $600 million of revenue contracted, I just need the money, they'll get the money. That's not hard to do. The issue comes because they're trying to build that demand while they're building the machine. So it's it's kind of getting the cart before the horse, to use a phrase, but anyway, so that is challenging. But to your question, like, I think what is very, very important about whether you want to call it climate or sustainable or green or innovation, or it doesn't matter, responsible, it doesn't matter what you want to talk about. There's a risk angle to this and there's an opportunity angle. And you have to think about both at the same time. But if you do that, you'll understand that climate, to pick one of those words, plays on both, right? Like, there is climate risk associated with doing nothing, right? And so understanding what could be the impact on long-term asset values, what could happen to communities, what's going to happen to insurance markets. We just released a paper. Dr. Sarah Kapnick, who works here, and Rama Berry and Cabal, who runs one of our groups in the investment bank, released a paper on the impact of the insurance industry from climate. Like, those are real things, and we need to consider those. That helps develop risk profile, right? That helps us understand risk appetite, what we're willing to do, what we're not willing to do. That's really important. Then there's the opportunity angle. There are companies that are going to grow. There are industries that are going to grow from nothing to something massive. There are markets that are going to develop that don't exist today. They're going to exist in the future. And so there's a huge sort of money-making opportunity, and that's okay too, right? Like, people should be investing in this space because they see the opportunity for return. That's how we're going to get that flywheel to start spinning. So we think about it no differently than any other financial institution thinks about it. There's risk and there's opportunity, and you have to keep those things in balance. And understanding how risk will show up in your portfolio, and in your asset values, and how opportunity is going to show up in the same way, that is very, very important. So I don't think we're thinking about it uniquely, but I do think that we have made it sort of a priority to spend time on these things and build the teams around them so that we're thinking about them regularly.
Oh, wow. Awesome. See, as a former CFO of JPMorgan's real estate portfolio, I'm sure you have a very unique perspective when it comes to balancing financial performance with sustainability investment, right? How do you make a business case for sustainability projects? And what advice would you give to other organizations who are looking to do the same?
I think you have to be thoughtful about what matters to your organization. I don't think you can walk in the room and just, use words like it's the right thing to do. Why is it the right thing to do for your company at this time, for your client base, for your constituents, for your shareholder, whatever? Why is it the right thing to do? So I think you need to, and some of this comes from my background in planning and analysis. Whenever you work in P&A or FP&A, as we call it, like, you always get you're taught to dig deeper. So you're always taught to, like, ask the question why multiple times. Like, why are the numbers different? Okay, but why? Okay, but why? And usually, like, by that third or fourth why, you get the real answer. And it's kind of similar here. You have to assume someone's going to ask you why multiple times, right? Like, this is the right thing to do. Why is it the right thing to do? Because it can, we could grow our business. Well, how can, like, we know why? Like, why is it going to grow our business? Like, you need to understand the real business case behind what you're talking about, both quantitatively and qualitatively, right? So you need to know the numbers and understand, what's this going to cost? Do we have to borrow money to do it? So what's our cost of capital? Like, really understand the numbers. And you have to understand the qualitative. What's the storyline? What's the narrative you're trying to tell? How does this help your company? You have to understand if this is a first of a kind transaction and it's going to be small. And so and how you're going to de-risk it versus a really large transaction that's going to make a splash. And there's a different strategy to de-risk that. So you just have to be able to think through those things. And I think back to one of the questions you asked me at the beginning and sort of your path, one of the things I think that makes me valuable, it's like, I struggle to say that, like, I'm special or valuable, but, like, I think one of the things that makes me valuable and people like me valuable in the sustainability space, I don't come from the climate world. I didn't take, climate science courses, or I didn't do any of that stuff in school. I was a finance major. I majored in dollars and cents. I worked in for the first 10 years of my career or more. And so my brain works in a very commercial way. I think about those things, but now I understand the climate space. And so I am sort of like taking this, foundation of finance and commerciality and economics, and I'm, like, putting sustainability on top of it. I think a lot of people in this space are sort of coming the other way. They really understand the climate space, they understand the science, they understand the issues and risks, and they're trying to figure out, how do I talk about this in a business that's all sort of commercially minded? And so you have to find a balance. So I would say, make friends with your CFO or CFO currently. Understand what it is that they're trying to do. Don't ask them for anything right away. Just ask them for help. Let them know, like, here's what I'm trying to get done, right? Here's what I'm trying to achieve. Like, how do I talk about this? How do I think? How would you think about it, right? Like, get a little bit more of a partnership. Bring them along with you versus, showing up in someone's office one day and saying, hey, let's go spend a lot of money on this. I think that would probably be one I would recommend. But it is kind of to the core of the question of, like, it comes down to economic business cases. Do what's right for your P&L. And if it's not going to be like instantaneously the right thing to do, find an alternative that gets you closer to where you're trying to go, right? Like, it's okay to, this idea of like, shoot for the stars, land on the moon, or shoot for the moon and land amongst the stars. I always say it wrong, but whichever one, just assume that's the one I said. But this idea of you can aim for something and miss and still be in a good place.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And take the small wins and let them add up. That's fine too.
Take the small wins, and that really makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So my question now is, you kind of, through this conversation, you've shown us a lot of the ways that JPMorgan manages its own carbon footprint, the carbon footprints of, its assets, but how you also kind of finance sustainable projects. How does your operational strategy complement your role in financing? How does your operational strategy complement the role in financing the global transition to a low carbon economy?
I think, like, the coolest thing about doing this is, I can't tell you how many people are going like, why do you do this at a bank? Like friends and family, they're like, wait, you do what at a big financial institution? The coolest thing about doing this at a financial institution is the connectivity that you're identifying, right? Like, actually, there are a lot of companies that our bankers are talking to that are looking for capital. They're looking for demand. They're trying to get their stuff out into the field. They've raised a good amount of money, but now they need that next thing. And so, like, now we can go talk to those folks and say, if they're in the transportation space, we operate transportation assets. They're in the real estate space, we operate in the built environment. They're in the amenity space, we operate cafes around the world. Like, we can actually go and work with those clients, or maybe they're just prospects, they're not even clients yet, and say, let us understand what it is you're trying to do. That's part of this conversation. Let us step into this with you. It's actually really interesting and important sort of virtuous cycle, because it goes the other way too. I might identify a company, and this has happened, that we're going to work with, and then really, like, get to know them and kind of fall in love with where they're headed and what they're doing and what the opportunity is, and then go call our banking teams and say, guys, you need to talk to these folks. These guys are doing it right. They're thinking about it the right way. Here's how we understand it. We're going to be using them, right? So you have this, like, virtuous cycle of, one hand washing the other, if you will. And it really can scale and support these markets and industries and businesses, because we're able to wrap ourselves around them as a firm. And I just think that's so interesting. And, as a financial institution, you go ask any one of these startup CEOs what they need. It's demand, yes. They need financing. They need debt. They need equity. They need advice. They need support. And those are all things that people typically go to a bank for. So to be an active participant in these markets, whether it's carbon markets or built environment or electrification or renewables or you name it, to be an active participant in that market and have the financial aptitude to support the economic needs of these people and these businesses, it's a slam dunk. It really is. So that, to me, is one of the biggest, like, when I answer the question of why do we do this? Not because it's the right thing, because it's the right thing for JPMorgan, right? There's a significant opportunity associated with doing the work that we're doing. And so we keep doing it.
Talking about slam dunk, before I ask my question, what's the favorite sports?
What's that?
Your favorite sports?
Favorite sports? I'm American. I grew up playing American football, so it's hard for me not to, like, love American football. But as I've become more international in my career, I've picked up rugby and cricket, other stuff. But if I had to pick just one, it would probably be.
I thought you were going to say soccer.
Or hockey. Yeah, no, I played soccer a little bit when I was a little kid, and then one of my best friend's dads started, like, the local American football, like, Pee Wee, little kids. and he pulled me over into it. And you can't tell on Zoom, but I'm a pretty big guy, so I'm much more fit to football than I am to soccer. So also love hockey.
Fair enough.
All right, cool. So my last question will be around looking forward. What are the next steps in JPMorgan sustainability journey, and what broader industry trends do you think will shape the future of operational sustainability in finance?
Ooh, yeah, the crystal ball question. You know, I don't pretend to have like a really good answer for this. I can tell you my thoughts, but I think we're going to need to see. I can tell you what we're going to need, right? Yeah. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. What we're going to need is we're going to need to see that next step function in human ingenuity, right? Like, you go back in history and look at like every time that we were faced with a challenge as a society or as a human race, like we found a solution that we didn't know was going to be available to us. And so, like, I do think in a lot of ways I think we need a little bit, like, it might seem silly because when you spend time in the climate space, you feel like there is a lot of pressure. We need that little bit of extra pressure, I think, to get that next sort of squeak of ingenuity, that next step function out into certain technologies. And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day about energy systems. And so if you look across, particularly the US, but around the world, energy systems are strained, right? And we know that there is more demand being added to the grid than supply. And this is not a renewables versus traditional assets question. This is a full supply demand curve point. I think something like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 states in the United States last year had some form of rolling brownouts at different periods of time because of, you know, peaking energy demand when supply was not available. And so, like, I think when you start to see those things, and so if you go and talk to utilities that have been sort of struggled most with this stuff, so there's a utility in California called PG&E. They were blamed for a lot of fires that were started years ago, not even the most recent ones. They built a research and development team to solve some of the energy problems in their particular grid because they've been faced with the challenge. And so I think when you look around, you're going to need to start seeing a little bit of that like pressure build up enough that people go and start doing that extra level of R&D and research and development and trying that one thing they maybe didn't try before to get that next step function. But I do think we're like right at the precipice, and some of these technologies are getting to a place where they really hit the mark. They become, you know, like scalable. They become cost competitive with the sort of less, let's call it less environmentally friendly solution. And that's the challenge, right? The challenge is if you ask any consumer, right, what they want to do, what they want to buy between two things that look exactly the same to them, produce the same result.
Yeah.
So I don't know, pick a something in your house like a refrigerator or something. It does the same thing. It keeps food cold. Okay, got it. One of them costs twice as much as the other one. 95% of consumers are going to pick the cheaper one. They're going to tell themselves, listen, I wish I could do the right thing for the environment, stuff, but this one is, I can't afford it. I got to do this one. So we have to find a way to sort of, I don't want to say remove the green premium. There's a cost to transitioning to a lower carbon economy. I think we need to accept that, but find a way to distribute that differently. Find a way where there are going to be winners and losers. Find a way where winners are somehow paying the losers and, you know, redistributing that wealth or that cost somehow. So I think that's going to be necessary. I mean, I'm particularly interested in the carbon market. So I do think that carbon markets do need to scale and will scale. But there's a significant gap between what's being built right now in carbon markets, all nature-based all the way up through engineered, and the demand that's showing up so far. And there is a theory that come the end of the decade, when, you know, many corporations' commitments will come due, that there will be more leaning in demand. But we're not seeing it yet. And so again, you come back to these things we talked about over the past sort of 40 minutes or so, and think about bankability. If that demand is there, the financing won't show up, these companies may not make it till the end of the decade, right? So this is where we're going to need to find these bridges, or we're going to need to find that like next level of sort of, I call it human ingenuity, but that next sort of step function to get things over the line. So I'm a firm believer that if you put enough smart people around a problem, you will find a solution. And I think more and more smart people are coming to this challenge, and so I do think we'll resolve it. But it's a lot of work, and I don't think I think people need to know that. There's a lot of work that goes on to try to make this stuff better and try to do all the things that we do every day in this space, not just at JPMorgan. There's sustainability teams at corporations all around the world. It's hard. And so I'm not saying it to be a martyr at all. I truly love my job. I think I have one of the best jobs in banking, if not in all of corporate America. But it's not easy. And I think people need to understand that these challenges that are in front of us are challenges.
It's very interesting you say that it's hard. I mean, it's something that we've heard quite a number of times in, the episodes that we've done this season. This season, we've had some form of a focus on, corporate leaders in sustainability, and each one of them has kind of stressed, the size and the complexity of this problem, but also kind of highlighted that, it should be hard. It's kind of the first time that we're trying to solve, this problem, and it's huge in scale. It's, super complex and very different across different, geographies and sectors and, all of those things. So I think you also started to answer my final question as well, on what advice you would give. But we like to wrap up the episode. We like to wrap up the episode with, a bit of an advice session. So for businesses, investors, policymakers, it can be directed at any one of them that are looking to accelerate sustainability efforts within their businesses and kind of the work that they do. What are some steps or strategies that you would recommend for them to integrate sustainability into their operations and their investment decisions? How can they, financial institutions, corporates, public sector as well, and individuals, that's a big one that we shouldn't leave out. How can we all collaborate to kind of drive sustainability?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I'll give some of the advice that's been given to me, which is you got to start somewhere, So the first step is the hardest. Take the first step. It doesn't have to be make it a step. Like, do something small, try something small. Find a champion. So if you're doing this inside of a corporation, if you're trying to do something sort of in the operational sustainability space, what we call it, but find a champion in your leadership team who's interested in this stuff. Like, let's be honest, some people really lean into this topic. Some people just don't spend as much time on it on a personal level. Find someone who focuses on it and cares about it. We've been very fortunate in working with our senior leadership. There are many folks who are interested in this topic, want to learn more, ask for more time when we go and talk to them about this stuff. And I'm going to put another 30 minutes on the calendar. I want to talk more about this. Like, find those people and they will help you navigate the complexities that you're going to face. So the first step thing is take the first step. The second is don't take it alone. People to support you in this journey, whatever it might be. You don't have to be good at everything. Just start somewhere and get great at something, and understand what the motivations of whoever your stakeholders are. We'll get to individuals in a second, because at some point, individuals don't have stakeholders, just yourself. But like, if you need to I don't know, influence or educate or otherwise get some group of stakeholders on board with you, understand what their motivations are. It's the first rule of sales. First rule of sales is like, understand what that person is looking for. What are they solving? Right? Like, I'll tell a quick story. My wife and I just bought a car. It's an EV, but she does not care about like performance. Like, she doesn't care about sportiness or whatever and all that. She doesn't care. And we were looking at a car, it's a great car, and I care about that stuff. But I also knew she didn't. It was her. This is the car she's going to drive every day. So we go to look at it, and the salesman starts telling her about the performance and this, it goes, and it's an EV, so they go fast really quick. But he's saying all this stuff, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, stop. Like, selling the wrong person. Yeah. Like that all work on me, but it's not going to work on her. she needs to know, is it safe? It's a good price, like whatever. And so we got there, but my point is like, know who you're talking to, understand what their motivations are. There are multiple stories to tell for any one product that you're trying to sell. I hate to use this word sell as if like we're trying to sell something specific, but this is about business cases and getting approval. And when you're in corporations, that's how things work. So just understand what it is. And if what they want is an economic return, focus on that. Do the things that produce return first. Focus on the low-hanging fruit first. And then you can talk about how good it does, for the environment or for your local community or for whatever. But just, it's like the changing your resume for different jobs. It's not lying. It's make it more finance focused or more sustainable focused in my case, kind of thing. So it's the same thing. I think that's useful too. On an individual basis, honestly, do all the things, right? Like, please do all the things. Like, please turn the lights off. Please recycle. Please, please, please. I do think that this is much more of a system change problem around the world. So I'm not saying that individuals don't need to do anything, but I do think we need to see significant system change, which means we need, policy and regulation and subsidies and things like that to incent the right behaviors from all the constituents. Because I do think, back to our refrigerator analogy, individuals in general have a lot of things to worry about. And, if you're in a fortunate position to have discretionary income and to be able to make decisions to buy the more expensive refrigerator, good, and do those things, of course. But a lot of people worried about putting food on the table and paying their mortgage and, their kids' health. And it's just, you can't ask people to focus on everything. And this idea that climate is going to jump to the top of everyone's list all the time is not real. I guarantee you for families in the Los Angeles area that were affected by fires, it top of mind very quickly.
Yeah.
People in Pakistan that were affected by flooding, top of mind very quickly, right? Like, when you're involved in an acute event that's driven by climate change, these things are on your mind for sure. The global, just the humans around the world who operate day in, day out, commute to their job, commute home, have dinner, go to sleep, and do it again, it's not top of mind for them. It's not. We need to recognize that. And so, as individuals, please do all the things you can do within your own means. But I would just if you can do one thing that is generally free, just educate yourself. Just learn a little bit about this stuff. You don't have to read the entire IPCC report or the UN's report on. You don't have to read those things. Just be willing to understand a little bit. Be open-minded enough to understand that, like, science was something we all learned in school, and none of us challenged it. We watched our teachers do experiments on the desk in front of us, and things happen, and chemicals mix together and colors change, and it's all science. This is all based on everything we're talking about is no different than the science you learned in school. This is organic chemistry. This is thermodynamics. It's all things that we understand. It's just affecting us in a certain way. And so I just take some time, learn a little bit about it, be open-minded to it. And, that's, I think, probably the most of what we can ask of people beyond what they can do in their lives.
Wow. Awesome. You see, there's one thing I always look forward to on the podcast is closing the podcast. But I don't think there's any other thing I would say that is better than what you've said. Because
that's the first.
Yeah, that's the first. Because that's one thing I always look forward to. And you mentioned 3 key things for me, which I took notice. Take the first step, don't take it alone, and educate yourself. Because if we want to protect our planet, we can't keep waiting for the right people to do the right thing, right? What are you doing on your own to bring the change? What are you doing on your own to educate people in your household, in your community, in your churches, the mosques, everywhere you find yourself? Make sure you take someone along. And on that note, I want to say thank you so much, Brian, for such a wonderful episode. And we look forward to reading more and seeing what JPMorgan Chase is doing when it comes to sustainability. I will definitely be in touch and keep inspiring, keep creating impacts with the work that you do. And on that, I should say thank you so much. Lamake.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was awesome.